Hello.
Hello.
And welcome to Coffee Class with Young Screenwriters. I'm Alexie. This is John.
I'm John.
And Avi.
Hello.
And Adam. And today we're doing something special. It is called Pitch Week. And so we have 4 screenwriters who I'm going to pull up to say hello in a second, who are joining us. And they're doing writing the feature course and are sharing a pitch, a pitch of their full movie, and we're gonna give them some notes. But okay, let's say we're gonna bring everyone in to say hi.
Hi.
Here we go.
Hi.
Hi everyone. Mike, Paul, and Kim. All right, so now John is going to do a little anecdote.
Adam, can't you get me out of this somehow? Can't you?
I warned you plenty in advance.
So I have one, and I'm reminded there's a little bit of backstory here, which is that there's a woman whose last name I won't get, but Susan, who's frequently, and maybe she's here today. I don't know if she is or not. But Susan and I realized that we worked at Warner Brothers together, and I don't know if you guys remember, but way back when I mentioned that Lawrence Kasdan had been at AFI to speak, and I asked him about The Clown and Body Heat, and he didn't answer. And she emailed us and said, I actually know Larry Kasdan, and I'll find out. So she saw him and said, hey, how about, do you remember? He said, actually, I remember somebody asking that question at AFI, and I didn't answer it because I never answer it because I get asked it all the time. And she didn't answer him either. She still didn't give me an answer. Anyway, and then Susan said, by the way, John, as I was doing a little research, I realized that you and I were at Morgan Creek / Warner Brothers together when you made Major League Back to the Minors. I said, oh my God. And we went through this litany of people that we knew there. That reminded me of an anecdote, because Alexie, for some reason, loves these anecdotes. I think she does anyway.
We all do.
Okay, yeah, good. So anyway, this one's kind of mean-spirited. Also, what I love about this one, this makes me sound very kind of macho, which is rare and not true. But so anyway, I was directing Major League Back to the Minors, and the president of production, I'm going to name names. I can't believe I'm going to do this, but Bill Todman, who actually I got along fine with, but Bill Todman's president of production. And we shot the last week in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. And it was last week, and 45 or 50-day shoot. I was dog tired. And he shows up for like the last couple days and starts giving me notes. And I've already shot them. I mean, I've got 18 scenes to shoot or something. I mean, it's like, and I've been working my ass off, and he comes in, he goes, and at one point I remember he said to me, John, could you make this 20% funnier? I'm like, what are you, I don't even know what that is. So anyway, we're on the set, we're in the Metrodome, we're in the stadium, we're on the set, and I'm there working, talking to the actors, getting ready to do a shot, and he yells from, like, he's sitting in a director's chair, he yells from over behind the monitor, hey, John, maybe you should do this. And I'm like, wait a minute, is this guy not only yelling over the cast and crew, not only coming over me and whispering, I have an idea, but is he yelling across the set to give me a note? I mean, is he really that audacious? Is he really that out of his mind? And it caught me so off guard that I turned to him and I yelled back across the set. I said, Bill, do you realize I'm going to finish making this movie before you finish reading the script? And the place goes silent. The place goes dead silent.
Wow, John's a tough guy.
And everybody's just standing like going, holy shit. And Scott Bakula comes over to me. He goes, did you really say that? And I go, yeah, I did, right? He goes, yeah. He said, Jesus Christ, man. He said, I guess it's too late for them to fire you. And it was too late. Anyway, that's Warner Brothers Back to the Major League Back to the Minors anecdote.
I like it. See, John,
Thank
you were
you.
prepared.
That wasn't that macho, but I loved it. It
was a little macho.
pretty
It was
I
a
mean-spirited.
ripped my shirt off halfway. I said,
See, it's not macho to rip your own shirt off. It's macho if your shirt just comes off because of your muscles.
okay, let's take it from the top. And then we'll talk and-
Oh man.
okay, there we go.
So yeah. So this. Oh, Avi, are you there?
Avi's here. He's just ripping his shirt off.
It's true. I think he might be a little frozen. So I'm gonna
Avi's frozen.
pull him off until we're better. But cool. So this pitch week is drama films. So all these have a drama slant, even though a lot of them are not pure drama. So up first we have Theo. Let's see.
Great.
Hello.
Hi, Theo.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Oh, there's Avi. Avi's back.
I apologize for that. I dropped out for a bit. Did I miss anything?
No.
Nope. We're just introducing Theo. So
Hello.
this is Theo. And Theo, do you wanna tell us a little bit about yourself and
Yeah,
why
hi,
the
everyone.
project?
I'm super excited to be here, and thank you guys for having all of us on here for this. I've been a storyteller for most of my life, and I've been working in publishing for the last 10 or so years in various roles. More recently, I've decided or discovered really that I wanted to become a screenwriter. And this film that I'm writing for When You Can't Find Me has a particular place in my heart because it takes place in like kind of a northern Ontario town, which is where I live. And I've done the move from a big city to a small town, and that has really shaped my life. So that's it on that one. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Right.
Cool. So do you wanna do it? Want to tell us your story?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Okay. So we open in a dark forest with teenagers playing a game on their mobile phones. This game leads them to spots, or codexes, as they're called, which are places in the real world where something creepy is supposed to happen. As they get closer to the codex, one of them starts acting strangely. Then in the distance, they see her, a mottled, disfigured woman crawling horrifically toward them. They scream and run, dropping the phone, which showcases the title of the game, Codex Found. We meet our protagonist, Tate, in her Toronto apartment, recording the introduction to her new mystery podcast. She's a millennial Nancy Drew, her walls covered with headlines of unsolved mysteries. But this investigation is different, more personal. Her younger sister, Rowan, has gone missing. Her phone dings, her Uber has arrived. She's procrastinated everything until this last minute. She takes a Greyhound bus north to her small hometown of Lakeside, winding on the highway through the Great Canadian Shield. It's autumn and the leaves are changing. Everything around her is dying. At the bus stop, her mother, Tess, waits for her. Tess is chaotically perfect, an overbearing charity volunteer with a frantic schedule and impossible expectations. The car ride home is tense, to say the least. Tess never approved of Tate leaving, and they seem to be able to talk about anything but Rowan. Back in her childhood home, Tate is drawn to Rowan's room and decides to check their secret hiding spot, where she finds a bracelet and a QR code to an app, Codex Found. When she downloads it, she's brought to Rowan's profile page, which has the status for When You Can't Find Me. Tate realizes Rowan knew she was in danger, and this is a puzzle for her to solve. Being back home is excruciating for Tate. Her father, Yussi, hides out in a locked room in the basement, while Tess tries to console herself by being even more controlling than usual. The next day, Tate goes to a coffee shop to meet up with her best friend, Chloe, who is very girl with the dragon tattoo, short hair, hacker type. After catching up, Tate brings up Codex Found. They play the game, which leads them to a spot in the woods, a particular looking tree that Tate recognizes from her childhood. She and Rowan called it a wishing tree growing up. Chloe starts to get nervous and begins to freak out about the game and begs Tate not to play with something she doesn't understand before leaving her in the forest. On the way home, Tate gets an in-game invite to a nearby art gallery/bar. It's filled with people and art all dedicated to the game. There she meets Ophelia, who is ethereally beautiful and calls herself a walker. And a walker is somebody who is dedicated to solving the game. The walkers believe there's a prize for whoever solves the final clue, though no one has been able to figure it out yet. Sparks fly between them, and then Tess calls, frantically asking Tate to come home. When she gets to the house, she finds a series of twig effigies in the yard with a photo of Rowan's face on them and a message carved into the ground. As before, so it will be. In that moment, Tate has a sense of misguided excitement as she realizes she's found herself in a real-life mystery. Tess and UC hold a vigil to raise awareness for the search for Rowan, where Tate meets Will, Rowan's photographer boyfriend. Her parents seem to dote on him, and he's very involved in everybody's business. The vigil is awkward, to say the least. Rowan would have hated it. And then UC gives an emotional speech, finishing by accusing somebody in the crowd of murdering Rowan. This causes large amounts of chaos, especially with Tess, who admits to Tate that she thinks UC is slowly losing his mind. After the vigil, a Snapchat account starts leaking degrading private photos and shameful notes about Rowan. The media swarms, and Lakeside is filled with press investigating the disappearance, but coming up with straws. Tate knows she could bring the authorities in on the game, but she chooses not to. She wants to be the one to solve it. She manages to slip out of the house unnoticed, following the game, which leads her to Will's photography studio, where she finds a wall of hundreds and hundreds of photos of Rowan. She accuses him of being the poster of the account, but he's adamant that he had nothing to do with it. He does, however, mention that Rowan had a stalker named Brandon, an obsessed guy from the low-income side of town who they call Grimers, and thinks that he's a part of it. Tate feels like she finally has a lead, so she brings this information to the police. But it turns out that Brandon went missing a week before Rowan did. Tate is frustrated and goes to the art bar, where she opens up to Ophelia about how she's really always been jealous of Rowan and her artistic gifts, and how she left Lakeside to become better than her sister. Ophelia shows her how to dig deeper into the game, showing her a series of photos of Rowan's dark alter ego called Maleficantia. She wears occult-like clothes, has dark hair and makeup, and Tate realizes her sister has changed, maybe even become a totally different person while she's been gone. Tate takes advantage of Tess and UC arguing to break into the room downstairs and finds what seems like the scrawlings of a madman. There's strange photos and a stringed murder board. She takes pictures before narrowly sneaking out, and she waits outside the door, hearing UC sobbing alone. She tries to investigate the photos, but finds nothing online. Then she looks on Codex Found, which unlocks more clues from Rowan, including a 4-digit code. When she talks it over with Chloe, Chloe gets upset, pointedly accusing Tate of caring more about the mystery than of her missing sister. Tate knows she should let it go, but she can't, so she calls Ophelia to play. The game leads them to a psychic who happens to have tarot cards that match the photos from UC's secret room. They do a reading, and the psychic warns them to stop looking. She says this has happened before in Lakeside, and it's dangerous to get involved. On the way out, Tate notices a picture of her parents' house on the wall. They go to Ophelia's on the Grimer side of town and find evidence of a darker side of Lakeside, a series of missing girls every few years. This brings them closer, and they finally kiss. When Tate gets home, she's high on romance, and the police are there. Rowan's body has been found. Tate falls into a deep state of grief, becoming more and more obsessed with completing the game, thinking there must have been a point. There has to be a reason behind all the clues. Rowan can't just be another statistic in Lakeside's dark history. Rowan's funeral is surreal, and many family members show up and expect performative grieving. Will is noticeably distraught, talking about all the plans he and Rowan had made. And Tess expects Tate to step up and host the family. And she's very disappointed when Tate can't do this. There's an underlying thread that Rowan could have. The police return Rowan's phone, and Tate uses the 4-digit code from the game, which works. While looking through the messages, she discovers that Will was never Rowan's boyfriend. It was Brandon, the suspect, who went missing first. Tate plans to confront Will when she receives the last clue of the game. It leads her to the forest, where she finds Chloe. Chloe admits she designed the game with Rowan as a way to get Tate home, but it grew rapidly out of her control. And that's when Tate reveals that she was supposed to be home the night Rowan went missing. She should be the one who was dead. She realizes she spent so much time being jealous of her sister when she really needed her. Chloe also reveals that Brandon is Ophelia's brother, and she should watch her back. Angry and betrayed, Tate rushes to Ophelia's. Ophelia is upfront and admits that yes, initially she did make contact to target Tate to get more information. But everything after that, the romance, that was all real. No one cared about a guy like Brandon going missing, not like they cared about a privileged girl from the right family. Tate realizes the problems with the town's dichotomy and decides to work with Ophelia to find Brandon and make things right. And then she gets a call from Will, screeching that something is wrong at the house, something is wrong with her parents. Tate and Ophelia race over, finding the house trashed. There are voices in the woods, and they rush out to find Tate's family dressed in ceremonial robes surrounding the wishing tree, which Brandon is tied to. Both Tate and Ophelia are swiftly knocked out from behind by Will. Tate wakes up tied to the tree, which is blurry and somehow alive. Tess, who is the leader of the group, announces the ceremony is about to begin. They plan to sacrifice Tate, Ophelia, and Brandon to the demon of the wishing tree in order to get Rowan back. Tate can see every girl who was ever sacrificed hanging from the tree. Rowan's spirit appears beside her, and the sisters reconcile. Rowan explains how she was killed by accident when they were targeting Tate. Tate is desperate to make things right and offers herself willingly in exchange for the others. She uses Rowan's bracelet to escape the ties, and the three of them all fall to the ground. Just as the cult descends upon them, UC appears with Chloe. He sprays gasoline over the scene, and Tate, Ophelia, and Brandon scramble as he lights a match. He reveals they've all been drugged, and Tess has been drugging him for years. Tess and the other cult members scatter into the woods, while Tate consoles her despondent father. The police and firefighters arrive, and UC turns himself in. 2 years later, Tate reads in front of a bookstore from her newly published novel based on her podcast. Ophelia and Chloe are both in the crowd. Tate and Ophelia are together, happy and healing. Tess watches from a dark corner before vanishing, and an audience member gets a notification on their phone revealing that Codex Found has continued to grow. And the end.
Great. Nice job.
Great job.
Wow. Wow.
Very cool.
Okay.
I really like the world building and the overall setting a lot. Really came through very strongly.
Sorry, I said that I meant to say something, but I realized I was muted. I was saying, sorry, I missed your time cues. I was too into the story, and I was like, oh my God, I missed it.
Yeah, nice
You did
job.
great.
Wow. What were you saying?
Yeah, that was fabulous.
Oh, I was saying I really thought that the sort of
Yeah.
the world building, there was a real sense of setting that came across in the pitch, which I think is really important in these sort of like uncovering the darkness of a small town story. You know, you want those tones and characterizations to come across.
Thank you.
Yeah. Theo. Yes. Yeah. Likewise, I thought the world was fantastic. I've got a question. Is Tate? I'm not sure where the movie ends because I don't know. Because is Tate trying to find Rowan, or is she trying to play the game? You know what I mean? Is this?
She's very flawed in that she wants to find Rowan, but that is ultimately a way for her to prove, like, to solve a mystery. It's very much throughout she's finding her sister, but that's all kind of a ruse because she wants to prove that she's better than her, and kind of toward the end realizes that she's been very flawed in how she's gone about that and should have spent more time, paying attention to her sister and being friends with her.
So would you say that her flaw is that she wants to be the one who solves it, because she didn't get police involved at that point, and that seemed like very much like a personal character flaw? I guess, like, I wonder what is in just restating, like, what is the emotional undercurrent for her, I wonder, and like, how is that reversed into her inner need? Like, how would you articulate that?
So what I would say is it has a lot to do with the parents, and especially with Tess. So the way that the girls were raised was very competitive, and the way that Rowan is the favorite. Obviously, she's always been the favorite. She's very talented. She's a virtuoso, mostly because the parents have made kind of sacrifices to get her those skills and haven't done that for Tate. So a lot of her emotion toward that is to prove that she can be better than her sister, and solve the mystery. But as she moves throughout the mystery and kind of gets to know her sister as she moves through it, if that makes sense, that's when she kind of realizes that she's going about things the wrong way.
We have a question or a note from the audience that I think is interesting, that I'll pull up. I was wondering if this was your intention, because I know that when in a pitch things have to get cut down, but this might be too tropey, but I feel Codex Found should be affecting Tate's life more and more as she played, making her seem crazy to normal folks. Is that something that you like? Were you intending for her behavior to be?
Yeah, she gets more and more erratic, especially like that's she becomes obsessed with it, which becomes a really big point with her and Chloe.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is more of a. Oh, sorry, Alexie. What were you going to say?
No. Totally, you go ahead.
I think for pitching this story, if I was to do it, I would right off the bat explain how the game worked.
Okay.
Like I feel like really understanding the mechanism of like, okay, in this world, there's this thing, and this is how it works. Not get really into it, but just like in like a succinct sentence, and then go into the story maybe.
As you said,
and that was kind of the opening scene. That was the gambit to try to do that. So that didn't work. So that's a good note.
Well, from an audience point of view, you could write the scene where you show everything, but if you're just telling us, oh, this happens with these kids and they're playing the game. But I think, first of all, I really like the characters, the sort of the tropes, the world building. Like there's so much going on here that really works in my opinion and has potential. I think as just imagining myself as like a first time viewer, the thing I think that I was a little confused about was like, okay, what fantastical element is real? Like, is it the secret cult of her family with the wishing tree, or is it the game, or is it the one same thing? Like that was kind of the one thing I was confused about.
So originally they were intrinsically linked. What I would like for it to be, though this may not be the best way to go about it in the long run, I wanted it to be kind of ambiguous to the audience where, was this all real, or was this, what came about of kind of grief and dealing with your dead sister and your, narcissistic family and whatnot. That's a really hard line to draw, of course. I realize that. I didn't want it to come off as too schlocky. As I was outlining it, I had made everything very, very real. And I was like, oh, I don't want this to feel too much.
Although, can I just give my opinion is you should lean all in on the game. Okay. That is the cool, unique thing. Like if you do have the mom being behind it after all, and if you have that cult element, if it can be like she was really like if she was involved with the game and
that was the original.
Using the rule of it. I don't know. I just feel that that's cleaner. Maybe
that
you guys.
I pulled up from Andile, which is just like one line about how cool, like if Pokemon Go was making people go crazy, which I thought like that might not be the right characterization for it, but just something like that where right off the bat we're like, okay, like cult go.
So here's a kind of naive question: I think I'm repeating myself. Forgive me if I am, but I'm is the objective finding Rowan? I am repeating myself. When Rowan is found by the police, I think that's something worth revisiting, because first of all, Rowan is found not by Tate.
No, you're right. That's a good point.
So Rowan is found not by the protagonist. And now I'm going in and Theo, forgive me, but I'm kind of going into my, a studio mindset, a network mindset. If finding Rowan is the objective, and that's what we're chasing, the game elements I love. I agree with everybody, but they need to be intertwined, because when she's found, when Rowan is found, in real strict narrative, and maybe that's not what you're doing, but in real strict narrative storytelling, we're at the end of the second act. We're near the end of the story. And then the fact that it goes on there. So, and again, maybe I'm just being too kind of pedestrian with this, but if I'm in pursuit of finding my lost sister, and she's found, and then the story continues on for quite some time. What was the story?
Right.
So, it's funny, John. I almost gave that note, but I was going to say it that I was going to impersonate you and give that note. I'm pretty sure you all.
And that was something I was worried about.
It's scary that Alexie knows what I can leave now because Alexie knows what I'm going to say. Alexie, what?
Yeah, I knew you were going to give that note, and I was going to say I'm going to impersonate John real quick and then give that note. But then now Adam can impersonate me probably with the note I'm about to give, which is comparing it to Winter's Bone.
I knew you were going to say that.
I had that thought actually.
Yeah, because I mean, the objective is the dad, and at the midpoint, the dad's dead,
But
he's not found, right?
yes,
John has a thought.
No, Alexie and I have become the same person, and Alexie, I apologize for that.
It's your fault.
But yes, in Winter's Bone, I can't believe she sucked me into this Winter's Bone thing again. Jesus Christ, you're
It's
terrible.
the greatest film of all time.
Yeah, believe me, I am Winter's Bone, Lawrence of Arabia. But anyway, so yes, Alexie, Theo, does that make sense? So he's dead, but she's still in pursuit, and that's why there's that brilliant scene when she reaches into the murky waters and has to pull out his hand. She's still trying to find Dad. So that's where you don't know what this is, do you? So that's what you've got when Rowan is found. You're I know I'm too pragmatic. You're 15 pages from the end of the film.
Okay. No, that's good. That's really great.
Alexie, is that what I was going to say?
That is what you were going to say.
And if I can interject something, in Winter's Bone, part of why the reveal that the father is dead still works with the story is it's not just find the father, it's find the father to save the house.
That's right.
So if your protagonist is looking for Rowan and then Rowan's body is found, then I think one way to sort of interrogate this is to... My God. Basically, so okay, I'll be brief. One thing to think about is what does Rowan? What is Rowan a stepping stone towards for Tate? But is it about stopping the disappearances? Is it about finding the developer of this game? Is it about proving something to somebody? It could be, it could be a way to sort of reorient this. It could be about revenge. It could be about, like this whole time, I never really believed that she was still alive, but I hoped, but I still wanted to get to the bottom of this. By the way, I just wanted to quickly say, really love the vibe of this. As a horror nerd, it's so eerie. I like with the effigies and the mystery and how the mystery is involving these disappearances. And I do want to echo the note where I wasn't entirely sure to what degree the supernatural element is real, because for so much of it feels almost kind of like the Blair Witch Project, where it can kind of go either way, where you're not entirely sure if it is supernatural or not till the end, but the fact that it could be or couldn't be, and how you can decide that is part of the power. So here, having a sort of a spirit step in and having the cult kind of reveal that their actions are supernaturally oriented, I feel maybe is a touch explicit for my taste, but at the end of the day, it'll be your story, so you'll decide that. But tone-wise, I think that this is really spot on.
So,
just to jump on that.
Yeah.
I was gonna. So thinking about the death, I feel like there's two ways that don't necessarily change the whole arc of your story. With that, it can be that the death isn't like finding her is not the full objective. Or it's that at the midpoint she knows she's dead, but doesn't know, like that the game somehow like reveals that she's dead, but they still haven't found her.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. No, that could work very well.
I have a question.
Find the body.
I may have missed. Does Codex help solve the crime, help find Rowan, or it's a separate entity or not?
It does help. It's meant to help. because the beginning of it
Yeah.
was kind of a way to get Tate home. So Rowan was part of it for at least some time, and had set things up in advance.
Right.
And then things did not go the way they were supposed to go, and it grew beyond the control.
Okay.
So here's a question from Brian. Says, who's all a part of the cult? Is the cop who finds her part of the cult? So I think it's just about like
That it's the family and the people in the town. So like the psychic was a member of the cult, and that's why the picture of the house was on her wall. So it's very linked to the town.
A completely different.
Wasn't in my iteration, but could be.
A completely different film that did the whole everyone's involved in the secret cult thing is the Sean Pegg film Hot Fuzz. And what really worked well about that is that they all had a unified objective. Like the antagonist had like everybody, it was all about keeping the town perfect and reporting no crime. Like it was a very tangible thing that like, oh, I understand why. Like if you're going to reveal there's a giant conspiracy, having like a clear like, oh, and that's what it is. Like that's why I would err on the side of pick a side. Is it supernatural or is it not supernatural? At the end, you can have it go in between, like as she's in like misdirection, as you're solving the murder, like what the audience might think in a moment. But like, I'd say pick a motivation for the family. That's
Well,
very and the cult.
What they all do, the whole town is when they sacrifice the girls, it's so that one of their children can be bestowed upon with gifts. So Rowan was sacrificed for, and that's why she has the gifts that she has.
Right. There's two ways to do the cult element. There's the Hot Fuzz version where sort of the gag is it turns out literally everybody is in on this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's the Hereditary version where you've seen people in the background and maybe you didn't really give them much thought, but it turns out that they're kind of in league. But it isn't necessarily everybody, it's just people you haven't given mind to. And it sort of depends on how much of a conspiracy are you going for. Are you going for a shocking reveal that your paranoia was correct and in fact, or
losing you out.
Did it happen again? It's when I opened my mouth. So the question is, are you going for the paranoia angle of everybody's out to get me and the sort of confirmation of that, or a sort of insidious, I didn't even know that those people were out to get me, but this whole time they have been.
So unfortunately, we have come to our end of the time, but we will be able to continue this conversation in the Discord with Theo.
Theo, great job.
Great job.
It's very cool.
So helpful.
Good. I'm glad.
It's so eerie.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, you did an excellent job. I think just
Great pitch.
overall pitching,
Wow.
like taking us up one step at a time and getting us there.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm sort of struggling to have big notes because I'm just along for the ride. I can see this movie, so it's really cool.
Yeah.
All right. Bye, Theo. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Cool. Oh, now it's John's turn. Just kidding.
So this is about
So next up, we have Mike. Let's see.
Mike.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Mike.
Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you.
Good to see ya.
Thanks for coming in and pitching.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
I like the pictures on your desk behind you.
Thanks. They're actually kind of props.
That's
It's a
funny.
little easier on you.
That's funny. God.
Oh man. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to write this story?
Pass. I told you I was going to do that. No, I'm Mike. I'm retired from the Navy. Living out here in San Diego. Started a second career and working TV news as a journalist. This story, my script, Twisted Limbs, roughly tells the events that happened to me back when I was in the Navy on a ship getting ready to go underway. But my wife died, leaving me with two very young kids. And then I learned that my in-laws were thinking about taking them from me in a custody battle. So that's the setup.
Wow.
Man. I'm excited to hear.
That's moving. We're done. We're done.
Yeah, that's in case you
We are done. Thank you.
So
Wow.
looks like Adam disappeared briefly, but I will add him in, but don't let him distract you.
I can relate.
I'm trying not to make eye contact with anyone right now, to be honest.
I'm excited. Yeah. All right, let's see. I'm just going to make sure that we're not missing Adam immediately. All right, cool. So I guess that's it. Do you want to go ahead and tell us the story?
Roger that.
Let's do
All
it.
right. So picture yourself in the Northern Illinois church. The year is 1993. You're staring at your wife's casket. The church organist begins playing. The pastor steps to the podium. Suddenly, this becomes terrifyingly real to you. But that's when you hear your mother-in-law, who's sitting right behind you, say, "Oh, now he cries." Short time later, you're back at your parents' house during the wake, and you announce that you're going to be taking your kids with you back to San Diego. That pisses your mother-in-law off because she spent the last year watching the kids. She expected to be able to keep them. But you want to bring your mom with you to San Diego to help watch them while you're gone. However, she refuses. That shocks you because she lives with a control freak. Undeterred, you move on to San Diego, your kids are in tow, and that's when you get slapped with child custody papers filed by your in-laws. You throw them in the trash. You give them no other thought. But the Navy is insistent. They want to know if your mother is really coming out to watch your kids. You still can't convince her, so you forge your signature. The Navy finds out, and they kick you out. Now you're back in Rockford. You're pulling into your parents' driveway. Your mother-in-law sees you. She calls the cops. They arrest you for skipping court. The judge tells you that if you want to keep your kids, you're going to have to get a job, move out of your parents' place, and pass a DCFS visit. DCFS is what a lot of people know as CPS, Child Protective Services. Your father says that he can help you. Remember, he being the control freak, but you got to do things his way. You end up getting the job as a security guard, something you're a little familiar with, and you meet a really cool guy named Ian. He is desperate to save up money so that he can get to college. His plan is to become an armed guard because that pays a little bit more, but he sucks at shooting. Thanks to your military training, you're actually pretty good at it. So you offer to give him some help. He gives you a shoulder to cry on, which is awesome because, again, remember, you're in your early 20s. Jurassic Park has just come out that weekend, but you can't even go see it. Everybody's talking about it, but you've got two small little kids, too small to go to a movie like that. And you feel like you're missing out on the prime of your life. Then, after your first mediation session, you come back to realize that you can't even find your kids. Your sitter's gone too. And that's when you discover that she has ditched them with strangers. You get your kids, you get back home. She shows up, your sitter shows up. She offers a sexual favor right in front of the DCFS agent who has picked that very moment to make her first visit. You fail that miserably. But your dad actually comes through. He hooks you up with a great babysitter. The kids actually love her, which is amazing because they hate almost everyone. But there's something strange about the relationship between the sitter and your dad. You actually know what it is, or you suspect what it is, but you just don't want to admit that your dad could be that kind of way. Then one night you get a call from your mom. She's distraught. She wants back in your life, but you think you know exactly the way things went down. After all, she had to be the one that tipped your mother-in-law off as to when you were returning back to Rockford, the town in northern Illinois. So the way you see it, your mother is responsible for getting you kicked out of the Navy and arrested. So you're cold and cruel to her. But she's alone. She's dealing with too much stress. And she kills herself. So now you're back at the church. Another funeral, this time for your mom. A guy walks out of the service. He looks a little familiar to you. So you follow him. Outside, he jumps you. He kicks your ass. He lets you know he's the reason why your mom didn't go to San Diego. They were working on getting married, but that's when you started pulling your bullshit. She wanted to go. He did not. She didn't want to leave him. The strain was too much for their relationship. So now you're back home. You're upset. You're drinking. But you run out of beer. your kids are sleeping. So you give in to what's become a really bad habit. You go on a beer run, leaving your kids home alone in their beds. You crash the car. Ian is able to come to your rescue. Eventually, when you sober up, you realize you're the worst thing in the world for your kids. You're preparing to give them up. But before you do that, you take them on a duck feeding trip, something that you used to enjoy doing a lot with your mom when you were little. But while you're there, another person comes up to you to let them know that feeding bread to ducks, something that has been going on for a long time, actually kills them, and that her grandkids taught her a different way. You use that lesson to figure out that maybe it's time to find a different path. And so you redouble your efforts to try to become a better person for your kids. You end up taking the shift that Ian desperately has been after, because that extra money can help get you and your kids out of the rat hole of an apartment and help you pass a second DCFS visit. Ian is naturally very upset at what you've done, at betraying him. You tell him cavalierly, find a different way to make money. Those words come back to haunt you, because he does. He sells you out. In court, he testifies that you abandoned your kids, physically assaulted your wife, admitted to physically assaulting your wife, and you'd wish that she had died sooner. Something that the other lawyers love, because there's been something strange going on with your wife's medical records, showing that she was chronically short on pain meds. And a fear of her being in pain was the reason why you chose to terminate her life support. So alone, dealing with too much stress, you try to kill yourself. You're now in a mental health facility, staring at a therapist. She gives you a choice. You can stay on mind-altering drugs, or you can face your fears. You choose to do the work. And some of the lessons that you were supposed to learn are now coming home hard. You realize that you are responsible for the outcomes in your life, that there is no one else to blame for the self-destructive things that you've been doing but yourself. Because even though you may have been groomed to be a certain way, you don't have to be that way. In order to begin to even caring for others, namely your kids, you have to first care for yourself. You run into your mother-in-law. She's there at that same facility, being treated for substance abuse. You realize she's the one who is taking your wife's pain pills and blaming you for it. You want to annihilate her. But you think back to your mother's suicide and to how cold and cruel you were, and where that gets you, the destruction that anger can cause. So you ask Sylvia, your mother-in-law, to take her treatment seriously because the kids need her. So now the therapist asks you why you even want your kids back. That's been a question that has been asked to you several times. Previously, you've only been able to answer unsatisfactorily because they're mine. But now that you're being partially reunited with your kids, you realize it's because you love them. So now home alone, because you still don't have custody of your kids, not after all you've done, you're getting in touch with emotions and memories that you've long suppressed. And we hear the therapist ask, what does your wife mean to you? To begin answering that question, you take your first visit to your wife's grave. And that's Twisted Limbs. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Mike.
That was incredible.
Yeah. Wow.
Fantastic job. You got a lot of people gasping throughout in the comments.
Wow.
Thank you.
You did great.
Nice job.
Yeah, it's very risky to do like a second person short story as your
I actually
pitch.
found that was the
It's
way
very
to make
interesting.
it slightly more interesting, and to take the focus off of my character.
Right.
Because I was already getting a little too emotional, as you can tell.
Understandably, but yeah, no, it's quite a story.
Right.
But I mean, what I think is pretty incredible is that it's one thing to decide that you're going to do a personal story, but then you also have to be able to take a step back enough to structure it. And you hit all the beats, like you did,
Thank you.
and you hit them hard. So I think that's pretty incredible. It's a really, really hard thing to do.
But that's
Definitely.
all. That's thanks to all of your help, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you.
It definitely comes across that this
thank
is
you.
a personal story, and I think that will help that the story kind of go the extra mile with the audiences, because when the writer cares and when it truly like matters to them emotionally, that's what we're all kind of honing in on more than the sort of literal, structural, kind of intellectual aspects. It's always going to be the emotion. So it by putting it first person like you did, and by getting emotional like you did, I think that really helps the story come across.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I will say the potential drawback is that you have to make sure that the script you write represents the subjective nature and like fragmented like moments of like a therapy session. Like it has to feel, well, you have to the script has to match what you just did in terms of tone and delivery and context, which is a challenge. It's
Yes.
it's hard to with a short story. It's easy to just sort of say you, whereas with a screenplay, it's like, okay, these are actors with lines, we're talking to each other. So like that's the challenge, I would say. But if you can pull it off, that's fantastic.
Right.
Do you plan to make this yourself? Is that a plan you have, or is this something that you're not sure about? That you don't know?
My son and I actually would love to make this. So if anyone has like an extra $5 million just lying around somewhere,
Oh yeah, sure. I'll be out of my bed over there.
Yeah.
Now that you say it.
But I completely agree with Adam that the part of what's powerful about your pitch is the you element, and that's something that you're going to have to convey when you write the script, making sure that not only does it feel subjective, but that it's very clear whose perspective is driving every individual scene, because it's easy to write a scene in which things happen and characters do things and push the story along, but making sure that you limit the perspective of the audience, that we only see what the protagonist sees, we only hear what the protagonist hears, will be, I think, crucial to get that across. Because I could imagine a version of the pitch where you describe it in third person, and it does read differently. And so when you write the script, kind of keep that in the back of your mind.
A way to do.
Yeah.
Sorry, John, you go.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, one of the hardest things, Mike, and you did an incredible job. One of the hardest things to work with when you're with a story that's so personal, or even by the way, a biopic, which is not, maybe you're a writer, you get hired to do a biopic. One of the hardest things to do is to take all of that kind of incoming information, which is amazing information, and then decide what to leave out.
yeah,
And where to move the pieces. And that, for me, would be an enormous challenge, because you clearly, it's very close. It's close to your heart. It's authentic. And the only way I can relate to it is, again, being hired to do biopics. You'll be in a room and you'll hear stories, and frankly, not as profound as this, and then you think, okay, God, that beat where, for instance, and I'm just making stuff up, but the beat where mom kills herself, does it really work with the story? I don't know. It probably does, but I don't know. But it's a matter of being so objective, stepping back so far from the story. One of the things that's coming through, the protagonist's name is Dave, so I'm going to call him Dave. I'm going to call him David. Okay, I'm not going to call him Mike. I'm going to call him David.
thank you.
I mean, I just, yeah, okay. So David isn't. Two things. David isn't in pursuit of custody enough.
Okay.
And that's going to be a problem. the mother-in-law is fantastic. All of Ian is fantastic. All of that. David's own demons and flaws are terrific. But, and also I'm trying to, and I don't know off the top of my head, but if there's a way that you can give this a timeline, a time frame to create some urgency. Now, what I was thinking, because originally, I mean, right up front, if I understand correctly, he's going to San Diego to right? Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And the ship gets underway in about a week after he gets to San Diego.
But if the ship gets underway, doesn't he have to leave the kids again?
Well, that's why he wants his mom to come out.
Okay, so see, this is what I'm talking about. Is if you forgive me if I hope I'm not stepping on anything here, but if David says I want my kids, but I'm going to take his job so I can leave my kids, you got a problem. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. So if he says I want my kids, he's got to go after his kids. Now, the thing that you're playing with, I'm sorry if I'm all over the place a little bit, but I also, when you first started, and when I read your beat sheet, at first I thought he's going to be in pursuit of this job in San Diego, and his selflessness is to get that job and then not take it to be a parent. I don't know if that plays, but if I were your producer and you're pitching this story, I'd say we need to think about, I want my kids, but I'm going to leave my kids.
John,
what?
I was going to say, haven't you brought up Kramer versus Kramer?
I've never seen that film.
No.
Mike, can I just
Alexie is in my brain. We're like, what?
Let me bring up, so the last moment is him recounting to the therapist in the pitch. Is that correct?
The last moment.
Is that a thing? I missed that.
Yeah, he's at his wife's grave. He's made his very first visit. He's always refused to go, but now he's finally facing his wife.
So what is so in the if this gets too technical. So in the pitch you just gave, is it like the character is in real time having a conversation with a therapist? And is that an element that you're flashing back to? It's
the when the therapist asks him why he wants his kids, we are in the room. But then we will watch as he gets partially reunited with the kids because they're at his father-in-law, his mother-in-law still being in the substance abuse facility. And then he goes home, and when he's watching home movies, that's when we hear the therapist in voiceover say, "What does your wife mean to you?" So it's kind of a flashback to that same therapy session.
There's a hypothetical version of this film that does what The Unusual Suspects did. Right. Just put it out there, like where it's all a conversation with his therapist, or with Kevin Spacey and the cop, and they're going back, and it's sort of like, well, what really happened, and what's the, like? I'm just saying, you don't have to do that, but there is a version that leans heavily into like this is a conversation. Avi, what do you have to say?
It's just what you're saying, Adam. It reminds me of the structure of Honey Boy, where where the present day story is Shia LaBeouf's character, whose name I forget, is in rehab and is having conversations with therapists, trying to get to his problems, and then that's the framing device for the real story, which is him as a child. By the way, so that I had a thought about, there are two pitfalls that I think personal stories often fall prey to, and one of them I think you completely ace, and the other one I think is to be determined, and it will come out as you continue to structure the story and work on the story. So the thing you ace, I think, is a lot of personal stories, if it's somebody telling something kind of autobiographical and personal, they tend to make their protagonist kind of a saint, sort of a victim, and in the right. And I commend you for making your protagonist flawed, and like flawed in a way that affects the story and has consequences in the story, which I think is hugely important and part of what's so engaging. And the thing that I think is sort of to be determined, there were moments where I kind of felt like there were things happening to this character, and this character wasn't making things happen.
Yeah.
And it's really natural to tell stories of ourselves like that. Of you won't believe what happened to me, or here's what I've been dealing with. And it's trickier in a movie because we want to see the protagonist driving the story and making choices and pursuing a goal. And so there are definitely moments in the story where the protagonist is making big moves and making big choices. But I think that there might be a stretch of the story where it is one thing after another happening to him. And I wonder if there's a way to make it more, to orient it more around him and make him the agent of what's going on.
Yeah, I agree, Avi, that with what you're saying. I mean, that's why I went back, and I'm not, and Mike, you talked about this, but I think the way to get that on track a little bit is if David is actually in pursuit of custody.
And maybe having a time limit.
Time limit is great. Is
I think it's
really
crucial.
necessary. Yeah,
Like,
Like he has to get custody in a month, or his kids are going to move to Europe and he's never going to see them again. Something like that.
Yeah.
What is
very
the
movie-y.
framing in Kramer versus Kramer? What is the is it like building up to the court date? Is that what's happening there?
Yeah, the court date, and they will drop the hammer. When the court date, you either get your kid or you don't. And they go to court. That's the ultimate test. And Mike, Alexie was making fun of me, which she loves to do. But if you haven't seen Kramer versus Kramer,
Yes, I have.
okay.
Yeah. I think it was one of your comps at the beginning that you, or at least when we talked before.
Yes.
And then Kim in the can't comment in the YouTube, but points out that there would be a time limit required by DCFS too. Maybe.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and there is a little bit of that. I've not talked about that much in the pitch, where shortly before his mom commits suicide, we learn that DCFS is going to give him one more chance. Basically, he fights for that chance. It's not just straight out of the blue, but he's able to convince them, hey, that was a horrible moment. Just give me one more chance. I promise I'm not gonna mess up a second time.
By
And
the way-
so,
How long does he have?
By the way, one thing
we
to think,
don't get an actual date, so
yeah,
that's
so
something
that's
to
what you want to
consider.
do. Yeah, and keep in mind that one thing to play with here is that David is his own antagonist.
Yes, he is.
Let's see.
I think the movie Flight with Denzel Washington did that very well.
Yeah.
By making it very clear that it was him under the influence of alcohol. Like, it was very clear. It wasn't just like, oh, he's got demons. It was, this is his demon. And when he makes this choice, he's the bad guy who does all the bad things. Like, so in a sense, it was like he's two characters. Denzel when he's trying to get his life together, and Denzel when he's, drinking.
And I think part of why that works in Flight is because he's his own antagonist, right? And in this one,
Well, that's why I brought it up. Yeah.
yeah. But in this one, I think you've structured it so that the mother-in-law is how you've planned it, right?
Well, in the tent poles, yes, and she drives the initial obstacles. But as I've gone through the front draft, I've realized that David is like 95% of the movie.
Yeah,
and there's just not enough time to put in the other things. The other things that I do put in is not bringing her substance abuse out of the blue. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen Thunder Road, where something like that happens in the third act. So I do have to stop David's journey for a little bit just to make sure that viewers in the third act are like, where's that coming from?
yeah.
Something an exercise, this is just a personal thing that I would advocate you to try is imagine what the trailer of this movie would look like.
Yeah.
Like sort of like what's, I know it's a drama and it's heavy, but what's the fun of the movie? Like, what are the like, this is obviously a movie that's like, oh, this is a great role for so-and-so.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how can you make the script read like an opportunity for a great performance and a really exploring, like, think about the trailer.
Get out of my head, Adam. That's what I've been just going over and over and over again for like the last couple of weeks is, where's the trailer moment?
Yeah, I'm thinking about the movie Cake with Jennifer Aniston, which she took on to sort of be this dramatic role, and it is this heavy dramatic role. And I remember enjoying the movie, but feeling that it might have been a little bit heavy on the dourness without the sort of moments of light to contrast it with. And the risk of that is you get numbed to it. If there's one level of tonality going on, if it's all dark, then it sort of stops mattering to us. We adjust to it. So having those kind of bright moments, sort of like this is what we're fighting for moments, to contrast against the dark stuff, makes those dark moments feel a lot more fraught for us and make us kind of lean forward a little bit, hoping that we get through to those light moments.
We will see a little bit of that. David is actually pretty good with the kids. He's overwhelmed and stuck with his own desire to blow up his life, that he just doesn't concentrate on the fact that he's actually a good dad if he would just give himself more of a chance. So we do see
David
those
save
moments.
a cat. You need to have David save a cat in the
right,
first
John?
10 minutes.
Oh my God. Oh my God. By the way, I have one. My last note is Mike. I apologize. This is one you'll hate, but I'll say it anyway.
I appreciate it.
Okay. Think about one child.
Yeah. I thought about that
because
too.
what you're doing is your break with one child that connect, because it's going to be really important in this that David is interacting, have a relationship, and with 2 kids, 3 kids, 4 kids, you begin to diffuse that. So I would consider one.
Plus, it's cheap for a budget.
Also, just pick which child you like better, and then make that the one.
Have you considered changing the child to an animal?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, fine, the kid's a cat.
Yeah. He wants custody of his dog.
That's a great comedy. Having this emotionally intense movie all about custody for a cat. That's great. I'd watch that movie.
By the way, you can sell that movie. You can actually sell that movie.
Cool. Well, we're actually at the end of our time, but like last time,
Thank you again.
yeah,
We'll be
in the Discord chatting about this still. So
Good
thank
job.
you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So next up,
Alexie.
yeah, it's me.
Hey.
Next up, we have Kim.
Hi, everybody.
I can't.
I
Hello.
can.
Nice to see you all today.
Good to see
too.
you. Do you wanna do a little introduction? Tell us a bit about yourself and this project.
Sure. I live in Watsonville, California on the Monterey Bay, but I've lived a lot of other places too, and hopefully that will come across in the script. I would love to write for like television and film, but I'm interested in all the aspects of filmmaking, so we'll see how far we get. But the most important thing for me is to write the best story that I can, and this class has helped me tremendously. I've taken other classes previously, and I have never been able to put the pieces of a story together in a meaningful way like I have with you guys, and you've been such a help to me, Alexie. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. My background, I have a master's in Spanish literature from the University of Oregon, and then later I went to USC, not as a film student like I wanted to initially. I was actually a reject from both USC and UCLA. USC told me that they had put me on a waiting list and encouraged me to apply the following year, which of course I didn't because I was young and got sidelined with something else. But we were living in Portland in 1992 and married at that time. So we got to see the whole grunge movement. Music is a large part of this story. And then in 1995, my husband called me up on a Saturday and said, "Hey, they just offered me a job in Los Angeles. Shall we go?" And I said, "Of course." My folks were living down there at the time, and we didn't have any children, so I was all about moving. So in 1995, we moved to Los Angeles, and we were living right on Sunset and La Brea. Across the street, across Sunset, was the Rock and Roll Ralphs. And it was a crazy time in a crazy place full of colorful, interesting people. It was really fun. So that's my story. I've done so many things, we don't really have time to talk about all my work endeavors. Right?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. That's
Sweet.
great. Great.
So let's
hear it.
I want to
Okay.
hear the story.
Story. My screenplay is titled Previously, and I have a connection to this story because 3 of the places where my protagonist journeys through are places that I've either lived and known intimately or visited frequently. So that said, my protagonist is a 50-year-old woman named Sage Greeley, and she gets on a ride at the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk and is magically transported in time back to 1995. But she doesn't know the year yet. And while she's on the ride, she loses a flip-flop. A dog comes through and steals the flip-flop. She loses her sunglasses. A passerby crushes them underfoot. She gets off the ride. She's got one shoe, no sunglasses, and her clothes don't fit her right. Her clothes are all baggy. She's a mess. So she finds a shop on the boardwalk to replace her flip-flops and sunglasses and goes to pay with the only thing she has on her for money, which is a $10 bill. And in 1995, you could get these things for $10, I'm pretty sure. But since she's acting strange, she goes to the eyeglass carousel, the sunglass carousel, and she's really inspecting her face very closely. The clerk feels a little suspicious about her, so she takes an extra hard look at the bill and realizes that the date says 2019. The bill has not been minted yet. So she asks, do you have anything else? Sage, my protagonist, of course, says no, and she grabs her stuff and runs. The shopkeeper calls for security. They're chasing after her. She runs into the bathroom, which is where she meets her mentor, Lindsay. And Lindsay helps her elude security and get off the boardwalk without getting arrested. But Lindsay, the mentor, is sort of vague about who she is and why she's there. And she helps Sage. They go and they sit and they have coffee. She helps Sage to understand that she's 25 years younger, 25 pounds lighter, and she needs to figure out what she's going to do. And Sage has no idea. So Lindsay says, well, why don't you come with me back to Los Angeles? I'm just up here for the long weekend, and that's where I live, and come on with me. So Sage thinks about it for about a second and says, okay, I'm in. They go to LA, and Lindsay has a tiny copy and passport photo shop called Copy That on the east side of Hollywood. We assume it's a front for money laundering. She lives on Sunset and La Brea in the same building where I used to live, where we used to live, which is a 4-story building just full of all kinds of stories. And now they're roommates. They meet Diesel, who is an attractive heavy metal guitarist with a bad substance abuse problem. Also a womanizer. Sage is attracted to him, and he is to her and to Lindsay and to probably 15 other women. So basically, Sage is sponging off of Lindsay for her basic needs. And she says, you know, I need to do something to contribute. I need to get a job. And Lindsay, shrewd mentor that she is, suggests that she use her insider knowledge to get rich in investments. And Sage says, I was born poor and stayed poor. I know nothing about investments. But Lindsay says, don't worry, I'll take care of that for you. So she coaches her. She gets her all the fake documents that she needs, fake license. Everything's just a big grift. Excuse me. Based on that fake profile that Lindsay helped her create, she is able to get a job in a Los Angeles investment brokerage. And it's an ethical, reputable brokerage. Her references and all her materials for applying for the job were so glowing, they basically hire without really digging any deeper, which I know is sort of implausible, but it's a movie. So that's the Act 1 break. She gets into the brokerage. And that is where she meets the antagonist, Charlie. And he's a broker who is clean dealing, ethical, beloved by all, especially Gloria, the head of the brokerage. She looks at him like a son. She cannot sing his praises quite enough. So she gets in there, and the first thing that gets people suspicious, that gets Charlie suspicious, is that she kills in the Pac-10 office pool. She plays them really hard, pretends that she doesn't know anything about sports, and of course, wins everything. She starts to get accounts that she shouldn't be getting based on information that she shouldn't have. And when she starts getting into Charlie's pocket, he doesn't think that he can just stand by anymore. She's a polarizing figure because Gloria hired her, so she wants to protect her. She doesn't want her hiring decisions questioned. And then Henry, who is Charlie's best friend in the firm, is like her professional mentor. He's going to teach her the ropes and help her get her foothold. So Charlie is just beside himself. He cannot understand why the others don't see what he sees in her, that she's a fake, she's a fraud, she knows nothing about what she's doing, and quite likely is getting insider information from somewhere. So during that time, the side plot with Lindsay, she runs off to Las Vegas with Diesel and marries him. Much to Sage's dismay, when she comes back from Vegas, she tells tells Sage that Diesel died on their wedding night. And Sage said, "Wedding? You actually married him? God, you're as bad as he is." So she moves out of the apartment. They part ways. So she's no longer got a mentor. Then at the midpoint, Charlie suspects all this insider trading, fraud, whatever. He gets the regulating bodies involved, the FINRA, which is, Financial Industry Regulating Authority, and the SEC. And then through that investigation, the FBI gets involved. They find that she has a fake broker's license, and she's arrested. And Charlie leaves the brokerage because his relationships with people who he cared dearly about are damaged irreparably as far as he sees it. So he comes to see her in jail. While she's awaiting trial, she's being held in whatever they hold them in, county jail, usually. Comes to see her in jail and tells her that he intends to testify against her just to watch her burn. And she says, "Don't bother, I'd rather take a plea bargain," which is exactly what she did. She takes a plea bargain for 6 months in federal prison for the forged broker's license. The insider trading charges can't be proved, so they're not even an issue. Meets more obstacles in jail, but then she's finally released after her 6 months to a halfway house. And she contemplates going back to 2020, but the world that she really wants to get back to is the world where she had the money and was enjoying herself and partying and having a good time. She leaves the halfway house prematurely and against the terms of her release and heads for Las Vegas, where she can do sports betting now that she no longer can do investments. So she's alone. She has to start all over again, and she challenges Charlie to a money off. They have 24 hours. He's doing day trading, and she's doing sports betting, and whoever wins the most money wins the challenge. So she wins and goes back to her swanky hotel room and orders a lavish spread from room service, but has nobody to celebrate with, so it's really a hollow victory for her. She finally breaks down and calls Lindsay. Lindsay meets her in Las Vegas. They bury the hatchet, resume their friendship, and Lindsay gives her a letter in an envelope, and she gives her instructions to open it later. So at the end of their evening, after their big night out, they decide to take a ride on the Big Shot at the Stratosphere. And Sage suspects at that point that she's headed back to 2020, but she takes the ride because she feels like it's time. She feels like it's time to face the music. And she's right. She's transported back to the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk, where she took off from. And she realizes that she's dead. They're actually pulling a sheet over her on a gurney, and yeah, she's gone. So her spirit, her shade, gets up off the gurney, goes back to the boardwalk, and she reads the letter from Lindsay. It explains that, yes, she is in fact dead, but Lindsay's boss offers Sage, whom he knows as a gambler, one last wager. She can either take her chances on final judgment, or she can become what Lindsay is, which is a psychopomp. And that's a guide for the dead. They would call it a ferryman, and there's really no female equivalent. So you can't say farrier because that's someone who puts shoes on horses. And that doesn't make any sense. But so Sage, evaluating, is not feeling good about her odds of eternal damnation versus eternal salvation. So she takes the second option and becomes a guide for the dead, a psychopomp. She recreates the scene shot by shot, line by line, of when she was running from security and met Lindsay in the bathroom. But now Sage is in Lindsay's place in someone else's story. So she has become the one who ferries the souls. And that is her unexpected victory after her defeat, her devastating failure of being dead. And that's my story.
All right.
Great job.
Funny world.
Thanks.
Wow.
Thanks so
Bizarre
much.
world.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
I really love, these sort of time travel, wish gratification stories, and I think they're always really fun. And so thanks for bringing one. It's been a long time since I've thought about this there were a lot of this type of movie in I remember Yesterday was kind of like this, right? With the Beatles songs like, oh, what if I go to a world where all this kind of reminds me of something like very fun like that, where you could, it's really, they're almost like coming of age stories where like the thing happens so a character can learn a lesson and change.
Right. That's right. Big is a great one.
Oh yeah, Big's another
Big.
That was a Penny Marshall movie, wasn't it?
There's
great.
there's the TV show and its remake, Life on Mars, about a modern day police officer who inexplicably finds himself in the 70s and just sort of resumes on the police force in the 70s.
Yeah, so it's a wonderful genre.
Life on, I remember that one. It had, I remember the theme song because it was Bowie, but yeah, I remember that one. We watched it. It was actually really good.
So Sage, and at the end though, it's kind of a Faustian bargain with Lindsay. Is that right?
Lindsay's boss, but yes, essentially with Lindsay, it's like you do this or you do this, and if you do this, maybe your odds aren't so good.
Okay.
Because if she goes up to face eternal damnation versus salvation based on her acts and deeds and what she supposedly learned through this journey, it's not really looking very good for her.
So what would you say was Sage's flaw?
She's greedy and lazy. She likes things easy and quick. Yeah. And
what would you say her inner need was?
She needs to go back. Of course, she needs to face the music, face her fate.
So I think a great film this reminds me of is Defending Your Life, with Albert Brooks and Meryl Streep.
Oh, yeah.
And it's about he's gonna die. He's dead, and he's going to it decides whether or not he passes on. And the film works because it's all about, can he let go of his fear?
Yeah. His fear of death?
Just his fear in life, like his fear of even after he's dead, he's still afraid. His whole life was defined by fear, and the whole judgment is like, can you let go of your fear or not? So I feel like if you pick a flaw, that she can't face the music. Like I think the best inner needs are like the reverse of the flaw.
Yes.
the opposite side of the same coin.
So
Yes, that's
hypothetically,
exactly right. Yeah.
So hypothetically, I feel like this could work really well if we don't start with the moment she jumps in. We start with her life unfulfilled. We start with her in her regular life. Like the first 15 pages or 10 pages should show a person. I think the beginning
Her
of
flaw.
Up is a great example. Like you know, get a sense of who this person is in their regular life and
Yep.
what their flaw is. How can she not face the music?
Right? If she doesn't take personal responsibility,
That's right,
ever,
yes.
she always avoids responsibility and tries to pass the buck.
Right, that's a great one.
Yeah, and then that plays right into the whole thing about how she's just trying to take the easy way out and have fun now that she's in this, like, she's been given a really cool opportunity. She's a time traveler and she's over there being selfish, making money. Like,
On the grift.
yeah. Yeah.
Running scams, ruining people's relationships,
Yeah.
lives, you know. It's not pretty. It's not sexy.
Adams, that's a good note. Adams, yeah, because it all works backwards from her flaw, right? Is that what you're saying, Adam?
So what I'm saying is, if at the end the whole thing is about she needs to accept responsibility and face reality on whatever those terms mean to her, you know, and her relationship with other people, her flaw should be that she can't do that.
Right.
And you need to show that. Like, I think when we were first introduced to her, we really need to get a sense that this is a person who is incapable of doing that.
Right.
Mhm.
Working
And
backwards from need to find flaw.
That's right.
Right. It'll make the same moments so much more powerful and invested.
Mhm.
Also, the thing, the thing that gets her on the ride, or the thing that gets her killed, arguably would be endemic to the flaw.
Oh, like if she gets on the ride because she's
So,
selfish or whatever.
She cheated her way onto the flaw, or she won't put on the strap or the bar or whatever. So, and that's what gets her in this predicament, and that's what she's going to learn to correct. So that cog will work.
She
will work
pushes some
back.
little kids out of the way so that she can
Something like
get
that,
on the
yeah.
ride
So-
before they
Oh,
do.
so she saved some lives. That's great.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a very John question. What is the protagonist's goal in this story? Because I'm not entirely sure that I keyed in on that.
Yeah.
She wants to make money. She wants to stay where she is because she likes what she's experiencing better than where she came from. And there are clues and cues throughout in the new world that reflect back on the old world and the kind of person that she was then.
So part of me
Yes,
wonders if that is a negative goal in this context, because it seems like what she wants is to be where she is, and instead of trying to get somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
And she wants to be rich.
So part of what I see is that, like, right now you have the act 3 is about this money off against Charlie. I wonder if that like face off thing against Charlie could be something that's like she decides like that she can stay in this world if she wins this. This is, as John would say, this is the bad version. But if it's something like when she first arrives there, she's like, I need an apartment so I can like thrive, like I can like be in this world. And then there's this contest at the brokerage where it's like you can win a bonus of $100,000 if you win this. And then her and Charlie both won it. And that would also put them both more at odds. And then at the very end of the movie, that like final money off could be part of that contest or whatever it is.
That's right.
So then
Right.
she's pursuing something that's selfish and screwing this guy who, presumably would have won if she hadn't time traveled in and all this stuff like that.
Then this may be overly technical, but it goes back to something Adam was saying, that in the first act, when we meet her and you're setting things up, meeting Sage, if she's in 2020, I would certainly play with the idea that she's somehow working in finance, That way, when she goes back to 1995, she can use knowledge from 2020 to help her break 1995 rules. And that makes
Right.
That would make it gel.
Yeah.
I have a couple of thoughts kind of on that topic, because one of them is, it sounded to me like she had sort of achieved success by the end of Act One.
Yes.
She is successful to the point where her nemesis is wondering why she's doing so well, which makes us sort of wonder, where is she still trying to get somewhere, or has she already achieved it? But the other thing that John brings up that I think is really interesting is she using her knowledge from 2020 of the 90s to succeed in life? Is she doing the Back to the Future 2, I have the almanac and I can bet on all the races?
Yes.
Or, okay. Because I think that's really important, because there was sort of thing about the promise of the premise. She's transported from 2020 to 1990s, to the 90s. And I think that there's so many interesting things that you can do with that premise that I think the audience is going to want to see. If I were to go back to the 90s, there are all sorts of wacky things you can, there is the stock market, but there's also major world events.
If I knew then what I know now. If I knew then what I know now, it's going back a little bit to what Alexie was saying. Also, she needs a definitive. So this is me being John. Wanting money is you need a sum, because getting, so if it's 10, if it's $1 million in 1995, it could be $1 million. So watching her get to $1 million or get close to $1 million, then we've got something we are driving for, as opposed to, I want money, I want $1 million, I want 10 million, whatever it is. Then you've given a more definitive objective.
Right. And something that's connected to that.
Real quick, so and then if her resolution is actually going to be a positive arc, I feel like the natural thing that happens there is that she gets the money, right? And then she realizes that she's alone, which is what you have set up now, where she wins and then she realizes that she's alone. But they would make that moment a lot more like visceral and intense if, like, we literally see her, she has her $1 million, she can go get the thing that she wanted, and she does it away.
And a thought that I have kind of on this topic is, what is at stake for her if she fails to achieve this goal?
Does she not get to go to heaven?
Actually, I thought that would be Adam's question. What happens if she doesn't achieve it? She's just sort of in limbo. She just kind of.
Right. Yeah, so you're going to have to figure out. It's going to have to be significant enough that there's sacrifice involved.
Right. Because part of this is, I feel like the stakes kind of come in very close to the end when it is revealed that the stakes are her place in the afterlife. But we don't know that for most of the story. So for most of the story, we're going to be wondering, why is it necessary for her to achieve the goal? Why does she need that lump sum of money? What is she trying to get with it? What is she trying to achieve that she would feel broken if she failed?
So can I bring up? Oh yeah, John.
You go, Adam.
So there's a version of this movie where she finds out it's the afterlife at the midpoint.
Okay.
And it's really about, like, the emotional stakes are about, I don't want to go back to the life I had before. Like, how can I keep that going? Like regardless of if I'm in the 90s, I'm not saying that's the movie you should do, but I feel like you have a time travel story that works pretty well, and you have goals that fit a time travel story, like the monetary, like what money can buy, the whatever that set amount is that would have meant a lot to her in her flawed original old world, doesn't really gel with the sort of River Styx, like, I'm going to now become the new guardian for soul. Like, that seems like a different endpoint than, like, the journey she's on for, like, like, if the objective is to get $1 million, how does learning that money makes me alone, or whatever that is, how does that factor into her ultimate decision? So, like, I guess my point is, there's a version of this that just made me think about, I don't know what the answer is, but there's a version where you make it all about, okay, this is the afterlife. How do I get what I want? How do I, make it work in that context? Or you make it a time travel story? I don't feel like both really.
Yeah, there's a found. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was saying, I wonder if there's a way to make whatever the monetary goal is really, really personal for her. Like that this is like if she, like however, she would have been 25 in the 90s. That's this, or no.
Yes.
Is she, okay, so this is like.
She's 25.
So she's been here before.
2020, she's 50.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So she's been here before. And like what did she want then that she didn't ever get? And then I guess why, and then also just thinking about like, okay, if her resolution is ferrying the souls, then what is she doing before she gets on the ride that is the antithesis of that? Like, why is that the word? Like, why would she never have done that before she went on this journey?
Right. That keys into her flaw. Yeah.
And I think there's a way to make that the end. It's just about thinking, okay, why would that have never been her choice before?
Sorry, Alexie, I thought you were going to.
Well, last thought. You got it. No, I mean, like we have like one more to go. So go ahead.
Oh, one just technical thing. Like the mentor is the character who has the answer of the inner need. The mentor is the person who tells her what the inner need is and supplies it, helps them. That doesn't solve the problem for them, but like it's the voice of like sort of the teasing out of like, this is what you need to change about yourself. So Lindsay, it's not just somebody who helps the protagonist. It's like somebody who has the answer in some capacity.
Yeah. And by the way, part of why I like Adam's idea of moving the reveal of her death to the midpoint is kind of structure aside and, flaw and need aside. I wonder if it might be too much of an ask for the audience if after 90 minutes of essentially a financial drama with like a light time travel element to sort of do that left field shift into, it turns out that she's dead and a spirit and has to make this cosmic choice. I wonder if just from a genre standpoint, if it might be a little hard to buy into if it isn't set up kind of earlier on. So I would suggest not necessarily that Adam's solution is the solution, but what are ways to make it so that when that reveal happens, it's less of a and more
less
of a
jarring,
that makes
Well,
I
think that part of that
surprising but inevitable.
Part of that could be too, just like the way that it's written, because I think you'd mentioned that there's going to be hints throughout that things are a little bit off, and it might just be like elevating those a little bit. Like, how like a dream, like you're wearing one thing and then you don't really know how you ended up somewhere else doing something. Like, just I don't know what the answer is, but it could just be little things that make it seem not quite real.
And it can also be sort of less cosmetic things, because cosmetic things I feel like can be kind of added in a rewrite pretty easily, but you could have a version of things where those things that kind of set up that this is the afterlife are actually consequential throughout, where things happen that actually screw up the protagonist that it turns out are specifically because of this reveal.
So, all right, we it's like we could keep talking, but so we will continue this conversation.
Okay, great job.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Very nice.
Thank you very much.
Great job. Okay.
And then now we have Paul.
Hello.
Hey,
Hi, Paul. How you doing?
Hello. Good. How are you?
Hi.
Good.
Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Absolutely.
So, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to write this script?
Yeah, so I'm an English expat living in upstate New York. I am currently a forensic accountant and stock trader, but I've done all kinds of different things in my past. This story is partially semi-autobiographical, and I've actually written it as a novel, so this is kind of a condensed version.
Wow.
Some of the characters are definitely real, and some of the events are real, and some of them are not. So, yeah.
Yeah.
As it goes.
As it goes, yeah.
Awesome. So you wanna tell a story?
Yep, this is the pitch for Oceans. We open on beautiful Provincetown Harbor, Cape Cod. Blue sky, glassy sea, sailboats. Then we pull back to a laptop's blinking cursor on a blank page.
and sitting behind it is David Cohen, an English expat, our protagonist, in his office in the beach house previously owned by Norman Mailer. David's a successful crime novelist, a multi-bestseller at the top of his game, at least he was. David's frozen. He hasn't written a word in 6 months, and he's past his deadline for the first draft of his new book. He's suffering from a deep, dark depression. Haunted by nightmares of a faceless shadow stalking him, David's spiraling further and further into darkness. In an attempt to break the spell, he decides to go for a run in the province lands, miles of biking trails and beach forests and the wild dunes at the eastern edge of America. As he's running, he sees a figure high in the dunes. He realizes it's a mysterious character from his past, Eric. But impossibly, it's the Eric of 20 years ago. He also realizes that this is the Shadow Man from his nightmares. David tears off after him, convinced that catching Eric will end his misery. David stumbles at the peak and falls down a cliff. He wakes in the town clinic, cut and bruised. The man who'd called the ambulance is in the waiting room, but it wasn't Eric at all, but a much older man, a scientist called Alfred, coincidentally from the same place as Eric, Iceland. David realizes now that he must travel back to England, find Eric and confront him. He believes Eric is somehow stalking his mind. He tells his wife Sarah, a restaurant owner and chef, that he must find Eric. She's frightened for him. He told her that Eric was dangerous. She knows David left England 17 years ago, and because of Eric, and that he's never returned since. In fact, he'd refused to return even when his publishers begged him to do a book tour there. She also knows that when David left Eric behind, he was racked with guilt, convinced that Eric couldn't possibly survive without him. She makes David promise that it won't be dangerous. David leaves the next day. In England, he first visits his best friend and mentor, Ronnie, a genius computer scientist and university professor. When Ronnie finds out the visit is about Eric, he tells David to go home. Tells him Eric is a dangerous sociopath who had David under a kind of spell for years. David tells him that he's a different man now, that he must find and confront Eric. David travels back to his hometown. He needs to breathe that air, walk those streets to find Eric. But he soon finds out you can never really go home, not when home is a fixed point in the past. He visits a number of known associates of Eric, including Eric's girlfriend from that time period. She's not very pleased to see David, blames him for enabling Eric, for allowing him to mistreat her and everyone else. She tells him, "You got out, you were free." While David's walking these streets, he keeps seeing flashes of Eric in odd places. Again, the Eric of 20 years ago. We're never sure if it's real, a memory, or if we're witnessing the fracturing of David's mind. Another friend tells David that he heard Eric might be dead, but also that Eric might own a flat nearby. That night, back in his hotel room, David has a writing breakthrough, but not his contracted novel. Instead, he recalls a crazed psychedelic hike he took with Eric 2 decades ago, where Eric demonstrated abilities that could only be called outside of the normal human range. Or perhaps it was a massive amount of LSD they both took. When David finds that flat that Eric might own, he finds there a female tenant who's never heard of Eric. About to leave, he catches sight of a self-portrait of Eric on her bedroom wall, which she says she's never seen before. He accuses her of lying. She panics and fires a crossbow at him. David runs, and frustrated, he tosses the painting. The frame smashes, revealing a second painting on the reverse side of Eric's childhood home in a village not far away. Although born in Iceland, Eric was raised in England. David travels to the village and finds the house empty. He remembers where the key is hidden, and inside Eric's old room, he discovers a photo of Eric as a small boy with his grandparents in Iceland. That's when David realizes that Eric's grandfather and a scientist from the province lands are identical. David's elated. He's not going mad. This is real. Eric is behind it. Traveling back on the town, it passes through a town Eric. Traveling back on the train, it passes through a town Eric had told him to never get off in. He told him that the town was full of neo-Nazis and was run by a cocaine dealer called the Poet. But as the train stops, David sees Eric laughing at him from a bridge. David gets off the train, but there's no sign of Eric. In the town, David's beaten and kidnapped by skinheads who recognize him and demand a huge ransom. When Eric tells him he's broke, they threaten to pay his wife a visit. The Poet and the two heavies arrive and take David. When David thanks the Poet tells him he hasn't rescued him, he's purchased his life. He tells David that Eric disappeared years ago with a large quantity of cocaine and used David as a guarantor. The Poet has little interest in money. He has plenty of that. What he desires is for David to get his New York City agent to take him on and publish his poetry. He tells David it's the only way he's ever going to leave. David's agent agrees. The poet tells him that he's free to leave, tells him to go home, but he'll never find Eric. He also tells David that in his decades as a gangster, before that in the army, he'd never come across anyone as dangerous as Eric. It's 6 months later. David and Sarah are in New York getting ready to attend a publisher's award party. David's written another bestseller, Life is Good Again. Better than that, it's wonderful. At the award party, David's seriously shocked the poet's there. Turns out he's the new darling of the poetry world. He's getting a Walt Whitman Award. David's worlds collide. He kept the danger of his trip to England a secret from Sarah. When she finds out, she storms off. David feels the darkness encroaching again. Distraught, he runs out into New York's rainy streets and into the path of the limo. The limo narrowly misses him. The window wides down. It's Eric, with a stunning woman as his date, who happens to be a princess. David is struck dumb with shock. Eric tells him that he'd heard he was getting an award and that he happened to be in New York. He wanted to see his old friend. David recovers and accuses him of stalking him. Eric denies it, tells him to get in out of the rain, that he has something important to show him. In an Upper West Side penthouse, Eric reveals his secret. 100 of the best and brightest are gathered in what can only be called a cult. Eric's created an organization called Tower, the oceans within us all. Eric tells David he created this for him. David's to be its leader. The people there stare at him in wonder. Eric tells him that they can do great things together again. David refuses and moves to leave. Eric says, stay for one drink. He spikes David with a powerful psychedelic, and David wakes up 2 days later strapped to a bed in a mental ward, suffering terrible visions the doctors worry may be permanent. Sarah arrives. All is forgiven, but she finds out Eric caused this, and she goes to confront him. Excuse me, a second. Sorry about that.
No problem.
No, you're
When
good.
24 hours pass with no word, David stumbles across town in his hospital gown and finds Sarah at the cult. She's staying with Eric, she tells him. I'm cured, she says, and he can cure you too. Eric laughs at him. You're bored, he tells him. You're so bored you have to write crime novels. Time was we made stories like that. We lived them. Join us. David's lost everything, his mind, his love, and all hope. In this state, he calls Ronnie, his mentor, who tells him there's only one solution. Tell the poet where Eric is. Ask for his help. His help. He owes you now. David finds the poet's hotel and begs him to help. The poet refuses, tells him all debts are settled, that he needs to do it himself, that Eric is powerful, but David is powerful too, that Eric is afraid of David. David has decided that he must do this. He prepares himself at his hotel, dresses immaculately, and goes to the cult. After a test of wills and power, David is victorious and frees Sarah. Back in Provincetown, David's written a new novel, a departure from his crime novels, a story of his past and future called Oceans. Sarah is happy and back in her restaurant. The closing shot is of David running on the Province lands again. He looks up at the exact place he'd seen Eric in the dunes over a year ago. There's no one there. David appears disappointed. And that is my pitch.
Great job.
Nice job.
Great job.
Wow, what a world. Yeah, you created a great world.
You said this is inspired by your life.
Yeah. I wasn't always an accountant, put it that way.
Did we just did we just get two autobiographical
Isn't that
pitches
weird?
from the protagonist named David?
That's fun.
I have one really crazy. Alexie will laugh. I have one really bad note.
Okay.
A bad idea.
Let's hear it.
I would consider making Eric David's brother.
Oh, I like that.
Okay. Well, then I'll stop. No, to me, one of the if you're going to pursue Eric, if David's going to pursue Eric, the audience cannot question why.
Right.
they have to say, I'm on board. I would go. If I were David, I would go too.
Yeah.
Passionately. I would be on this journey to find Eric. And it feels to me that he sees this vision, and now we have to let the audience, it's exposition. It's gonna be, this guy was a part of my life. He's a bad guy. Everybody says he's a bad guy. He manipulated me. He wasn't particularly good to me, and yet I have to go find him. So it's one of those things that a lot of screenwriting, a lot of what we do in here, we call it class, is what questions should you be asking of story?
Yeah.
So much of this is what asking the right questions, and then that will lead you to the right answer. But if you don't ask the right question, you can never get to the right answer. So the question to me is, why pursue Eric? The third man, we know, Alexie, there. See, I brought up the third man. We know that he's come here. I've got a job for you. So you come all the way to Vienna for the job. That made sense. But so anyway,
yeah. Well, I think
my point.
He feels like he has no choice but to pursue him, because he thinks that this is what's been stopping him from living his life and writing his novels. But it could definitely work as his brother, because they were very, very close.
Okay, just for clarity, so he thinks he sees Eric from 20 years ago kind of stalking him, right?
He does see him.
He does. So what is that? Is that his own mind, or is that Eric, or what is, or do we not know?
Well, it could be either, and it's never really fully answered.
See, that there is the one thing you need to solve, and it will work. The one thing is, what is real, and how is it internally consistent?
Yeah.
Well,
does he have powers? Was it just a psychedelic trip?
Eric does admit to stalking him at the end. He does admit, and it's quite apparent by the end of the film that Eric is very powerful.
What is Eric's motivation?
Yes, God.
Eric's motivation is that he's pissed off that David left him 17 years ago. He can't handle it when anyone leaves him, and David was his best friend, and Eric needs him.
But I feel like if you can find a tangible motivation, but I need to use him for this thing so I can get this other thing. Like, if you can have Eric have a specific manipulation, a thing he kind of needs to get his own goals, because to have him just sort of be obsessed with David for kind of vague reasons isn't satisfying.
I like that vibe though. It's obsessed plus a reason.
He is obsessed, but he wants to use David's fame for his cult, and that's the motivation. And he tells him that at the end. He says, with your name and your fame, we could turn this into something huge. And so that's kind of what he says in the end. So
also you have this cult, and he has powers.
Yes.
I feel like, there's a way to do that. But in terms of the story you presented, just in terms of my own personal bias and what I would buy into, what verisimilitude, what I would find acceptable, having him not have powers and having it all be about he has some sort of external motivation. Eric anyway, he wants power, and he has this cult, and he has some goals with it, and he's orchestrated these events, solves a lot of problems. I don't know if the others agree with me on that.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
I think I see it, because part of what really interests me about the story is the hold that these characters have on each other that's entirely psychological. And I think that starts to dilute if there's actual reason to believe that they have supernatural abilities. But if it is just they have, for whatever reason, they need the other because the other made such a specific impression on them and is just living in their head rent free, so to speak. Mm-hmm. I think that's really interesting. And I think it's going to be execution dependent, because when you say that David's motivation for chasing Eric is because he believes he can't get over this block otherwise, there's a version of that works, and there's a version of that doesn't work. And the version that works, I think, is the one where you make it abundantly clear that he cannot write. He needs to write. If he cannot write, he will fail. And the thing he keeps coming back to is Eric. If the stakes are high and is presented in a very tangible way. But I do like the idea of it being these characters are just obsessed almost involuntarily at this point.
So it'd be like if he can't write this book by the deadline, then he's gonna lose the deal that he's already laid on, and it's gonna wreck everything. And then this Eric thing keeps haunting him. Sort of that. Avi, is that kind of what you're?
Pretty much. Like I want to know, because ultimately the truth is Eric, like, nothing's actually stopping Eric from writing, and he'll be able, or rather David from writing, and David just has to realize this. But if he has to realize it soon.
Did anybody think for a moment that Eric and David were going to be lovers?
Oh no.
There was a moment where I thought that Eric might have those feelings for David, if not the other.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, brothers are lovers, not
Let me
both.
tell you, the real Eric is now a woman living in Thailand.
There we go.
well, okay.
So there you go.
Yeah. Oh.
So maybe.
Okay. Yeah. Now.
If that's an avenue that you take, you don't want to be very, careful and sensitive and make sure that you do it well. But that is an avenue to take potentially.
Yeah, in the novel, that is what happens, and it does really happen. But the novel there's so much there. There's so much more there in the novel that I really had to take the key elements and just try to put them into a screenplay form. I mean, there's definitely enough in the novel to make a small limited series out of instead of a screenplay.
Well, it changes the theme. It changes what you were saying about these characters. Which is something to potentially explore, but it would be a different story than when you pitched us.
Yeah.
I would rewatch Fight Club.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Great. Yeah.
But the difference first of all, the difference obviously is that it's a very different message. It's different. That was very specific, like in grounded social commentary of real social structure. So that's not what you're doing at all. Yeah. But in terms of like their relationship to each other and the codependency of it and their shared motivations and goals, I feel like that's I want a reason to like Eric. I feel like that would make this a lot more complicated.
Yeah, he's very charismatic, and that does come across, I think, more in the book and the screenplay than the pitch. But he is very charismatic, and he is very likable. But he just kind of turns, over time.
So, but if he has powers, I don't want to just assume that we've just changed your mind on that. If he has powers, what are they, and how did he get them?
Yeah, it's kind of on a shaman scale of powers. I mean, he's really, and he was very interesting.
Did he go to a place and like become shamanized, and now he's a shaman, and now he's using those shaman skills? Like,
yeah,
there is power in really working out the logic. Like, what is the one true reality? I mean, that is to be saying, there's one way to. That's the way that 99.9% of working screenplays work, and then there's like people like David Lynch who are like, well, it doesn't really matter, and I understand that's a approach. It's just not.
Yeah.
I would advise to find an answer, whatever that might be.
Yeah. Particularly because this is a script that revolves around mystery, right? There's a character who is seeking answers.
Yes.
And I feel like the audience might feel shortchanged if the story avoids giving answers and not for a thematic reason to not give those answers.
The worst thing you can do in a mystery is say, "Oh, it was all real." Wait, all the misdirections.
Right.
People want to feel like, "Oh, I knew it."
Yeah.
Which means like showing all the wrong paths.
Yeah. So I had to make it less ambiguous about whether or not.
There
is magic involved, or maybe he's just very, very good at using psychedelics to manipulate people.
Yeah, that's the direction I thought you were going.
Yeah,
well,
that's really interesting.
Yeah, that kind of is a direction, but I kind of wove in the shaman element to it too, which doesn't have to be that. It doesn't, for the story, it doesn't need to be that.
So something that Kim mentioned that I wanted to bring up is just that the poet is great. The fact that he just, it's so funny that he just like wants to get his poetry.
Yeah.
Finished.
Yeah.
Do you know what it reminds
He's
me
really
of?
good. He's a really good poet in the end.
You know what that kind of reminds me of? In The Big Lebowski, one of the subplots is our protagonist thinks that somebody's following him, and it turns out it's just a private detective who thinks that Lebowski's a private detective, and he just wants to know, like, how are you so good at what you do?
Yeah.
And it's entirely irrelevant to the actual, story. Like, there's a version of this that's that.
Yeah.
We have a question from the audience saying, what is David's flaw?
David's flaw is that he takes on responsibility for other people's lives. When he left Eric behind, he spent years racked with guilt, thinking that Eric couldn't survive without him, and also that he's, he kind of loves Eric despite how badly he behaves, and so
his inner need is then that he has to give up his guilt.
He has to give up his guilt, and he has to let Eric go in his mind.
Yeah.
I like that.
I like that. That works. I just, once this pitch will hit 40% harder when you've decided what the consistent reality is.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of really great elements here. And if you really show the give and take of the relationship of I would say if I were you,
mm-hmm.
I would rewatch Fight Club and not to take any ideas, but in terms of when they introduce Tyler as a real character, I would actually introduce Eric and have him interact with David before the end of Act 1.
There's quite a bit of flashback. The whole hike that he writes is in the screenplay. So Eric does feature in it, but just not in real time until the end. But I could definitely do that.
Just something to think about. Because at the end of the day, you've got to find the answer.
Good enough. Yeah.
Cool. I mean, there's one thing that I want to say is I wonder if the flaw and need might also hit harder if it's sort of cleaned up a little bit, if it's a little bit more straight, sharpshooting. Because if the flaw is he's obsessed with Eric, and then you can have whatever reasons he has for that, but the flaw is he has that obsession, and the need is to lose that obsession. I feel like that hits really hard, and then you can spend as much time in the story as you want trying to explain both why is he obsessed, why is being obsessed a problem for him and those around him, and why does he need to let go. But I wonder if just having the flaw and need be those two very simple things might give the story kind of a stronger spine.
Okay. So something that maybe I missed, but Eric feels guilty, or David feels guilty for leaving, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is there a reason why that was particularly terrible?
They just went through so much together. They shared so many different adventures and crazy times, and I think drugs also heightens that. And I think that kind of imprinted on David's mind. David has a very caring nature, so Eric was able to manipulate that caring nature very easily. So the guilt, really is maybe not his own, but maybe guilt that's been planted by Eric.
I wonder if there's something that can tangibly hurt Eric about him leaving, that they were gonna. I mean, it could even be they had plans together.
Yeah, some big plan that would work.
Yeah.
Or the cops were going to arrest them, and David ran, and Eric got caught.
If they had right. If you have a foundation as to why that guilt is there, I screwed you over. I know I did. I left you busted. I need to clean this up.
What's the memory that he's repeating in his head?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that would also
it goes back. Yeah, there's still some ambiguity there. Yeah,
that would make the arc really strong too, because then the letting go of the guilt is also taking responsibility, isn't it? Accepting that, really accepting that he did something not good to this guy, and
that is not fixable, and that's okay.
Can I just throw out an idea? I just think it might be that, because I feel like the writer's block is kind of irrelevant to the story in terms of what you presented. I maybe the actual script doesn't make it that way, but I would make Eric the inspiration for a very successful character in his stories.
Oh.
And I would make it be he used his experiences with Eric in his novels. And he does, and that's the stuff that he's inspired by. He can't not write about Eric. So then it connects his writing directly to
I like
So
that a lot.
Wow. And the event,
Spice it up.
Adam, could the event where he screwed him over, that going back to that's more, it's more tangible, it's more foundational, it's part and parcel of everything.
right, you could have him at a book
Yeah.
signing, and a
Yeah.
fan's asking, "What was your inspiration?" He's like, "Oh, somebody alone," and then he sees Eric. Like you can do stuff. You can do so many things.
Oh,
Yeah.
that
explains
takes out that relieves a lot of the ambiguity. It's a great idea. I think it's a really interesting idea.
And then, the thing that he screwed him over for, I don't know exactly how that plays out, but that could be part of one of the stories, and maybe it's done differently, or like, it ties into the fact that he's.
Well, now he screwed him twice, right, Alexie? Now he screwed him twice. He screwed him over at the event, and now he's making that event viable with his writing, so he's taking advantage of it again. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it reminds me of that movie where the guy found the novel on the train and he wrote the novel and then he got it. You know what movie I'm talking about? It was recent. I can't remember the title,
but that's an interest. It is.
I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Cool.
Wow. Okay.
Well, I think that we actually just, Adam, that was a good wrap-up note.
Adam.
Hope it's helpful.
Well, thank you.
For Adam.
Thanks so much, Paul. Thanks for coming.
Thanks so much. I love the pitch.
Nice job, Paul. Thank you.
Great job.
Cool. Well, hey, Avi, you want to say what coffee class is next week? We're back to some films.
We're doing it. Next week, we are doing one of my all-time favorite zombie movies, Train to Busan, which is, in my opinion, it's terrifying. It completely just turned me white as a sheet while watching it. So that's a warning for you. But it's also such a masterclass in structure, in character arc, in theme being an extension of character and character interaction, character, flaw and need. And specifically for me, the thing that really kind of stuck with me is how every obstacle in this movie, you'll see, keep an eye out for it. Every obstacle in this movie forces characters to make a choice and has a consequence that affects everything going forward. Wow. Keep it in mind. It's fabulous, and I'm really looking forward to discussing it.
It is that good, John. It is that good.
I can't wait. How do you spell Busan?
Busan. It is a Korean zombie movie, and it is the other Korean movie set on a train that I'm very into.
God, this is going to be my 5th Korean zombie movie this week.
You'd be surprised. There's a number of them.
Well, one of them is kind of a rom-com, I admit.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you rotating between rom-coms and Korean zombie films?
Those are the options.
This is on Amazon Prime, right?
I believe it is on Netflix.
Netflix, I think.
Oh, it is. Oh, great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The two,
I can't wait.
The two genders, Korean zombie movie and rom-com.
There you go. That's John's jam right there.
That's my jam. There you go.
Cool.
Okay,
so
fun.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you to everybody.
Really good job, everybody.
Yeah, and if you haven't joined the Discord yet, be sure to check it out in the description. And we can talk more about if you want to be on pitch class in the future, in the Discord. So join and we'll chat there. But we will see you next week.
Okay, take care, everybody. Be well.